If you are someone who's ever felt burnt out, it can actually be a sign in your business that your pricing is broken. Over 70% of service based businesses are known to undercharge for their offers. I feel like no matter how many clients I sign, I'm not making more money. If you are someone who prices low, you oftentimes will overcompensate that alone without looking at your marketing, looking at the offers, looking at the team. That alone could be the reason that you're not scaling. Let's talk about how to stop undercharging, how to stop over delivering, and to finally step back into your power when it comes to your price point. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. I am excited to dive in today because if you have pressed play on today's episode, you are someone who is ready to dive into all things pricing. And I know that pricing for many of us can feel like, does this really need an hour to decide what my pricing is going to be? Right. And that's because so many of us determine our pricing along the way in being business owners in a very quick and easy fashion. Oftentimes, most people's thought process when I talk to them is that they saw their competitors' pricing, they kind of took a guesstimate on what they think their pricing should be, and boom, that price ended up on the payment link, that price ended up on the sales page. And listen, I am all about scrappy entrepreneurship. I'm all about, messy action and not overthinking things along the way. But there's also a big difference between scrappy and then just flat out not strategic. And so, what we're going to talk about today is helping you to really understand adequate, strategic, intentional pricing. And we're going to do so in a couple different ways. I'm going to be talking about the 7 different pricing mistakes that I see in a lot of the different businesses that I go into. So this can be a product-based business for some of them, some are agency-based businesses, consulting, course creators. I kind of have themes that I'm seeing that are the big 7 mistakes that many people are making in pricing their offer or pricing out their product suite. And then I'm also not just going to leave you there with like, hey, here's what you're doing wrong, but I also want to help you to fix it. So we're going to go through, in my opinion, what I look at as a 6-part framework that's going to help you to really understand how to look at your pricing and how to decide on a price. And even as I'm saying this, you're probably thinking, okay, well, 6-part framework. Like I didn't follow 6 steps. I didn't look at 6 steps in order to complete my pricing of that offer that I have. Like, shoot, what am I missing? And that's the whole point of today. When we are in the earlier stages of entrepreneurship, we are scrappy, we are speedy, and we take these steps to try to execute as fast as possible. But in that process, oftentimes we're missing really important factors. We're missing really important elements that are the difference of whether it will scale. And this is an important distinction I want to overview today. This is something that would I love you to have this as a beginner business owner and to like literally go through all these 6 steps? Yes, obviously that would be like the best case scenario. Did I go through all these 6 steps to determine my pricing at the beginning? No, because I didn't even understand what these 6 steps were. And so now that I'm someone who myself has scaled my business and also helps other people to scale, when you're scaling, we need to slow down just a little to allow ourselves to be intentional and to allow ourselves to make sure that we're not creating more work down the road for us. If you are someone who's ever felt burnt out, it can actually be a sign in your business that your pricing is broken, right? When we hear about things like burnout, we often think of, rest and days off and structure and schedule. And like, yes, all of those things are important. But I've also seen people who have been very burnt out in their business because they just genuinely are not being compensated fairly enough for the work that they're putting in. And I want to actually share something with you. Over 70% of service based businesses are known to undercharge for their offers. And that is not because of market demand, but because they fear comparison to others in their industry, or they lack clarity on how to actually charge what they want and get it to consistently close. So you'll see here that like this is a topic that I wanted to discuss because it's not a matter of, oh, I want to talk about pricing. This is something that's a massive impact to your business, to your peers' business. And if I didn't dive into it, into my business as well, it affects all of us. And so let's talk about how to stop undercharging, how to stop over delivering to the point where it's compromising you and your business, and to finally step back into your power when it comes to your price point. So, again, we're today going to be covering the 7 pricing mistakes that I see within a lot of different businesses. And with that, the 6-part framework that I'm going to help you to use to actually set your prices with intention. Let's start off with some of the things that we see that are really the biggest disconnects when it comes to pricing within businesses. If I could say that the number one, I rarely like to say that this is the one thing or the one thing that I'm seeing, but it is really the most common of them all, which is the fact that you are pricing based on your time that you're giving to somebody, not the value. And this is, by the way, I'm not giving this in the context of like the hours you put in. It's not that we don't want to run the math on how many hours you are putting in. We do want to know the cost. The thing is, many people will say, well, this is how much I am an hour. So if you want to book a call with me, it's X amount per hour. If you do decide that you, for example, want to, hire me for 6 weeks, it will be 6 hours. So therefore the price per hour is X. So the total investment is blank. Right. So I see people who are looking at how long something takes them, and then they're charging that to a client as their forward facing pricing. And so there's so many issues with this model or with this approach, but the main one being that all you're actually positioning as the value of your offer is your time. And so what we know is then when someone invests into you, the only thing that they're deciding they want to make the decision on when they're buying from you is how much you cost per hour. Right. So there's a very big difference between someone who says, I have a 6 week structured routine or regimen or program, and the total investment is X. Right. They could say, yes, how often do I talk to you? Sure. But we're not saying if you want a session with me, it's X amount per hour. And I'll tell you why. There's two pieces to this, which is you do want to sell an outcome. You don't want to necessarily sell the process, the nuts and bolts. So that's like a 101 of sales in general. But the other thing you want to reference is the fact that if you have or ever decide that you want to increase your hourly rate. So, many of us as business owners, we don't want to be capped at making a certain amount per hour. Let's just say right now you compensate yourself $50 an hour. Some people I know compensate themselves $2,000 an hour, right? Well, if you came to me and you said, okay, well, great, you can have this package. It works out to be $1,500 an hour. That's a very different sell or quote unquote pitch than the other, which might be like, okay, great, the total price is 7K for this experience. I have no idea how much your hourly cost is, right? So, one, I'm making the decision on the value. The other, I'm making the decision on do I believe that your hourly rate is feasible? And the thing we want to consider is if you're charging based on hours, the only other context that I'm going to consider is how much I know other people to charge for an hour. So let's just say I'm a therapist. Therapists are notorious for charging per hour, right? Their hourly session. Well, if I'm a therapist and say like traditional therapy goes for anywhere between around, $150 to $200 an hour. Well, if that's the case, then say I go somewhere else and you want to be a therapist that builds your business and has this scaling business, but when you work it down to numbers, you actually charge $500 an hour. When I compare you to your competitors, I'm going to be like, why is this person so expensive in comparison to the rest? And we're going to talk a little bit about, branding and pricing and all of the pieces. Because the thing that's also important to note is pricing is not just about cost. The 101 of every business is that businesses generate profit because there's markup on their pricing. So let's just say a therapist charges $200 an hour. It doesn't mean you have to charge $200 an hour, but you have to understand that your ideal client will be cross comparing you to competitors based on that. So the first thing we want to look at is we want to make sure that your pricing is based on a transformation. It's based on an outcome. It's based on a problem solved or ROI. It is not based on your time. And if you sell your time as the main way that you promote yourself and that you promote your business, you will always stay stuck because you only have a limited amount of hours in a day. So if an hour of your time is X amount of money times 24 hours in a day, there's your cap of your salary. That's as far as you're ever going to go. And the workday is not 24 hours, it's typically 8 hours. So you want to take, again, your 200 times 8, that's your new salary. So this is really why we don't recommend almost ever to charge for your time. And that's because it really is not for the long-term scalable. So again, if you solve a 50K problem in 2 hours, but you charge $200 an hour, it really is undervaluing the true impact of what you're doing for that client. Okay. Now, the other thing we see is that I see this a lot with people who are heart-centered businesses, from which, by the way, I would say like 90% of all businesses that I work with are heart-centered in some way. You're undercharging in the belief that you're quote unquote accessible. And this is something that is not actually a pricing strategy unless it's built into your brand. Okay. So if you keep your prices low, you might be doing this for fear of like, well, I don't want to lose out on leads. I don't want to be considered to be unaffordable for people. And what it does is it's actually sometimes attracting the complete wrong audience. It has the ability to completely erode your brand and really decrease your perceived value, which I'll get to in a second. And oftentimes it will lead to burnout. It will lead to a place where you feel like I'm doing all of this, but I'm not being fairly compensated. So, what you want to think about if you are someone who wants to be accessible in your business is you don't necessarily have to have all of your entire business, meaning every single offer or product or service that you have, be quote unquote accessible. You can also look to have tiers of investment that you have different stages of pricing that are tailored to different stages of problem that are therefore at different levels or heights of numbers. Right. So, like for me, I have things that, I have a membership that someone can go into for $97 a month. It is a hot seat membership that is literally $97 a month. So, if that's something that somebody wanted to get my coaching, they should not go into private coaching, which is a very large investment. They should be going into something like a $97 a month because that is for what's provided within it. It is something that, yes, is accessible. But what ends up happening though is, and there's actually a stat to support this, it showed that people who price themselves lower are actually more likely to result in scope creep and client over dependence and over delivery. And that was actually a Harvard Business Review study that was done in 2022. They noted that if you are someone who prices low, you oftentimes will overcompensate because you're trying to give them all these deliverables, but you're also not necessarily charging what you need to be charging for those. So, the issue that I have with the idea of being accessible, and I want to make it very clear, I am not saying that the goal here is to have inaccessible pricing, meaning that you should price yourself out of the market. But you have to go in with a strategy around your pricing, not just, oh, I want to be accessible, so discount everything. I'll give you an example, and we're going to come back to this at the end, but I gave this example all the time. So, an inaccessible pricing, meaning not accessible to the average Joe, is something like a Dior. If we go into Dior, we have a expectation of how much things in that store are going to cost, and it's not accessible for most of society to walk in there on a random Tuesday and buy something. Now, if we walk into, for example, a Target or if we walk into a Walmart, we can actually know that on average, it's accessible for almost everybody to buy something in some way within that store. And so the thing we want to keep in mind is you don't want to be Dior who discounts. That's what I'm saying by being accessible. If you want to be a Dior, you have to play in the Dior category. If you are someone who's going to build your business as a target, you still have to have pricing that is, again, relevant to the person coming in, but you've worked it into your pricing. It's actually built into the model of your brand, of how you price things that are on the shelves, like, i.e., how you price your offers and services. It's built into your model. So what we want to do is we want to remove this idea that we are just Dior but discounted. That belief is not a matter of making things accessible. It's actually the fastest way to struggle within that business. What I'd rather you do, if being accessible is a really important thing for you and for your business, is work it into your product suite. So have tailored offers that are designed to be accessible for people, or have an accessible based business, meaning it's built into your brand, it's built into your structure. The other thing that I will say is probably the number one thing that I hear when people are explaining to me how they got to a certain price point is that they're looking at competitors. And it's not a matter of, again, me saying, well, your competitor pricing is not relevant. It is relevant. And we're going to talk about that and how to determine your price. But the thing that most people don't consider is adjustment of that pricing. So you might go consume your competitors and you see that they have a course for $997, or they've got a mastermind for $12,000, or you have private mentorship in something that maybe ranges from like a 9,000 to a 30,000, right? And you're seeing these investments, you think, okay, great, that's what my competitor is charging. That's what I'm going to charge around there. The problem is it doesn't take into account a lot of other factors. It doesn't take into account the overhead. It doesn't take into account your experience and expertise. It doesn't take into account the model of delivery or the model of your actual business and what you're providing. And there's two things that can happen in this, which is that you can actually price yourself too low because you may have skills and outcomes and proof and results that mean that you definitely could be charging more for your offer. And then there's the other side, which is maybe you're pricing way too high based off the proof, the results, and the expertise that you have. So I often see this, especially in the earlier stage businesses. And when I say earlier stage, it doesn't mean that you're a new entrepreneur. It can even be a new business. But when someone has a new business and they're like, well, I want to charge X amount, it's a very high ticket price. And I say to them, okay, well, do you have proof of concept? Do you have some way for me as the client to verify that you're legit, to verify that this product works? Like, do you have something for me to sink my teeth into to say, okay, great, like they are marketing something that truly works? And so what I find is a lot of people, when they don't have any proof, when they don't have any expertise, when they don't have any credentials, are so quick to be like, I want to charge the highest rates. I want to charge the same rate as so and so on the internet who's been doing this for 8 years. What most people don't see is that person on the internet for 8 years had pricing that, for example, was on the low end and they had to inch up over and over the years, right? Like some of my pricing for, what was it, 12 weeks of coaching with me used to be $997. $1,000 for 3 months of coaching used to be my pricing years and years and years ago. Now, I am nowhere near that today. I am high five-figure investments now to work with me privately. But the reason I mention that is if someone looks at my current pricing, they're like, okay, great. Well, that's what Kate prices. I'm going to go do that. The problem is you're skipping all the steps in the middle. And so it is important not to say that when you're in the earlier stages, you should be discounting or that you have to go really, really low. It's more a matter of understanding that you have to price with consideration of a variety of factors. And you want to recognize that the first couple clients or the first people that you sign to an offer don't necessarily always have to be at the highest price you're ever going to charge for it, because the goal should be to get people into the offer, to get proof of concept, to get results and the social proof that your product, your system really works. And with that, over time, once you build trust and once you have brand proof of your product or service, then we can always leverage that to increase price along the way. But out the gate, you don't necessarily have to go at the highest of whatever you're seeing your competitors do. So the thing you want to consider is really your price is a matter of understanding your positioning, having proof, and understanding what the promise is. It's not really about just looking at what everyone else is charging and great, I'm going to look at that and do that. The other thing we see, which anyone who's in the financial section of business, you're going to be like, yes, louder for the people in the back. This is essential. If you are not running the cost of your offers, you are potentially digging yourself a deeper hole in business, because setting a price needs to consider the time that goes into your delivery, and it also needs to consider the time of the contractors who are assisting with that delivery. So what I find is that many people don't have enough of a margin built into their business. And for me, I typically recommend a minimum of a 30% to a 50% margin within most businesses, because what I've seen, and this is again, like this is why I wanted to talk about this, because people will come to me and they'll say, Kate, I feel like no matter how many clients I sign, I'm not making more money. Like I feel like I'm always struggling to make money, and yet I'm getting consistent inquiries, I'm getting consistent clients. So something here is not making sense. And when I then go into looking at, okay, well, great, what's happening here? We saw, okay, whoa, of course you're not scaling. One client came to me and they had like a 12% profit margin. So I said, of course you're not able to grow, because by the time that you have paid your team, paid yourself, paid your taxes, left money for, in the business, there is literally, there's nothing left over. Right? Like there's nothing worked in here to consider the fact that there needs to be extra money in the business. Like there's nothing noted here that actually keeps in mind profit at the forefront. So what I do is I typically recommend to people, and I have like a worksheet that we do. And what we do is we outline all of every single offer they have. We outline all the hours, all the cost, all the contractors, any time they have, administrative assistance, any of that. And we actually give a value dollar to the true cost of what it means to provide a service to a client. And so once we know the average cost of what it takes to provide that service, then we add the margin on that. And you'll notice that I noted 30 to 50. You don't have to have identical profit margins across your entire business. You can have certain offers and certain services that are considered to be higher in margin and others that are considered to be lower in margin. So I want to clarify, it doesn't mean that you have to have like 30 across your whole business, 50 across your whole business. It's more a matter of understanding per offer, what are our margins? Do you even know what the cost is? Do you even have a margin built in? That's where you start. And then over time, you can always adjust to say, okay, well, where, if anywhere, do we want to have a higher or a lower margin? And I wanted to share something with you because it was really interesting when I was kind of, diving into some stats. And I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd for data and I'm a nerd for strategy. And one of the things that I found was that agencies that operate typically under 20% margins will always struggle to scale their business. And that was a study that was done by Profitwell in 2023. And so agencies under 20% margins, right? So there's little stats that study companies that are noting if you are a done for you service, if you are an agency where you are someone who has less than 20% margins, just that alone, without looking at your marketing, looking at the offers, looking at the team, that alone could be the reason that you're not scaling. So you often hear me talk about tweaks, right? We talk about tweaks, we talk about refinement. This is what I mean. This is not a matter of, well, I just got to be more consistent on social and I just got to push a little bit more. What if you're an agency who has your pricing right now that's never run through the things we're talking about, and that's the reason that you're not growing, is because you don't know how to run the cost and you don't know how to determine the profit margin, and maybe you're operating off 15% margins, which is the real reason that you're not able to scale. So this is why these conversations are so important. Now, the other thing I want to say is, you want to make sure that you are not over delivering in an attempt to justify your price. And I see this a lot with people who have some mindset stuff around pricing. They believe that if they just cram more deliverables, I'm going to give them extra calls, I'm going to give them extra services, and I'm going to, add more time with me, and they're going to add. And they add all of that not because the offer or the service needs it, but they're adding it in the belief that if they don't add it, they're not going to be able to charge what they want to for their service. So you're setting pricing based off the fact that you're like, I'm going to set a price, and in order to justify that price, I'm going to add all these other things to my offer. But you'll also note, we just talked about cost. When you're adding all those other things to your offer, you're also potentially increasing the cost of your offer, which means that the reason that you justify charging X could also be the reason that it, from a cost perspective, doesn't any longer make sense. So we're seeing that this actually can do a couple different things. It can impact your cost. It can actually as well overwhelm your client. And for you as the person delivering, I've seen time and time again, it creates resentment. We start to resent the business. We start to resent the clients because we believe that we're just doing so much. And yet you're the one who set up that so much for that price point and what you're providing. And so the thing that is important for you to know is that more access to you and more access to just more deliverables and more stuff doesn't necessarily equate or equal to value. Those two are not joined together. And so because of that, I really want to invite you that setting a price is not strictly just based on deliverables. We're going to dive into things to consider with setting your price, but it's not just based off of deliverables. And the other piece that I see, which is a huge mistake, is people not updating their pricing. The amount of business owners that I've talked to who are like, yeah, I really need to update my pricing. Yeah, I really need to update my pricing. Let this be a reminder that if you have not updated your pricing, let's just say in the last year, it's not to say that you should just go and automatically charge an extra $2,000 a month. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying go and actually run your pricing. Go and look at, is your pricing intentional? Does it make sense? Give it an audit. Give it a quick reference to see, is this still in line with what I think I would or should be charging? And the thing that I think is important is that you're going back to your pricing. And there's two sides I see this. I see people who either don't adjust their pricing at all, like they just have a set price they charged 2 years ago and they stick with that forever. The other thing that I see is people who are constantly changing their pricing. Meaning it's like on a Tuesday, it's one price. And you're like, next week it's going up. And then next month it's going up. And then next month it's going up. And you're like, what? Like, how? Why? So, like, you start to think, why are you changing your pricing all the time? What even is the value of this offer? So, I really believe that your pricing should be something that you adjust as the timeline and the demand of your business grows. And there's factors to consider, which is your authority. How is your authority in what you do and your offer or service? How has that adjusted? We also want to look at the results. So, do you have proof of results potentially that we need to be considering in showcasing really the true value of what it is that you do? And then also demand, right? And I'll give you a story around this because even for me, with my private coaching, I was mentioning earlier, I used to charge $9.97 for 12 months of private coaching, which I want to clarify is no longer the price. So don't reach out for private if you're needing it for $9.97. I would love to still charge that, but just I'm going to explain in a second why I don't. I over the years added more expertise. So originally, for example, because I didn't have a team, I didn't talk about team. Now I do talk about team with my clients. Before, I didn't talk about a lot of things like, systems or operations, for example. And then our shout out OG, Kelsey, who's our head of operations, she gave me a masterclass on all things ClickUp and what that could do for a business. So once I saw her build this incredibly helpful thing inside of our business, I was like, wow, this would be amazing to transfer this insight to our clients. So then we started to have more conversations about operations. Then I went through leadership coaching for myself to understand how to be a better leader, took that insight and said, okay, great. Well, how can I provide that knowledge to people that I'm mentoring? And so as time went on and I started to build my book of knowledge or my book of insights, that the value and the depth or the level of coaching that I was providing was increasing significantly because I was just absorbing so much and I was also looking to learn and execute so much. We had also been doing a lot in our business. So because of that, the learning along the way, I thought, okay, well, I could do all these 7 extra things that I never did for clients 6 months ago. Like I have a lot of extra things that I want to share. So that additional insight got added as a consideration for our pricing. My authority as a result of that got added as a consideration for pricing. Results. Results were a huge thing that made me feel confident to charge more for my private coaching. I had a client who came to me in private coaching and she wanted to scale. And, her testimonial and all that stuff's on our website. So I'm not going to talk about it in depth today, but she hit 7 figures in 3 calls together. We literally had 3 calls, and within those, she had a 7-figure business. And so that's not something that, again, maybe, years and years ago, I would have had as proof to say why you should pay this. But we want to know that when we set certain prices, the motto I tell people is the level of the price that you charge is directly correlated to the level of the problem you solve. And I'm going to say that because I know every single time that I say that, someone says, can you say it again? The level of the price you charge is a direct reflection or is a direct correlation to the level of the problem that you solve. So, if you solve a bigger problem, you're going to have an easier time charging or asking a larger price. So, I had this result that then said, okay, I'm clearly solving a big problem here. People join my private and they're hitting 7 figures. Like, this is what really is the basis of what I'm doing here. And so then the other piece was demand. I had a season, and it really adjusted my business model. I had a season where I had tons and tons and tons of private inquiries. Like I could not believe how many people were like, hey, private, private. Yeah, I'll take my private spot. And I was like, oh, okay. And so very quickly, our private inquiries increased. And so because of that, I had so much demand that I literally was like, I'm not taking any more private clients. Like, that's it. So the thing that I think is really important is that we recognize that your price needs to evolve as you evolve as a business owner. Recognizing that if you are a service, the price you have today is probably not going to be the same pricing that you're going to have 5 years from now. Now, it's not to say that it has to quadruple or that it has to 10x, but it should be evolving as you evolve within the business. Again, around your insight, your expertise, your authority, your results, and then the promise of what it is that you're actually providing within that offer. So, there's a lot of things that we do as, common practices, right? We talked about, we look at undercharging to believe that we're being accessible. We look at, selling our time, not maybe the value of the offer. We're looking at just taking our competitors' pricing and calling it our own. We don't really think about adding in profit. And so because of that, we kind of slap on a number and then quickly realize, wait a second, why do I feel like I'm not making any money? We add lots of stuff to the offer, to the service, in the belief that we can now finally charge that thing that we want to charge. And maybe you're one of those who sets the price and you never look back and you never reset it or you never review it. And we've all done it. I've done it. You've done it. And this is something that I want to first normalize. Again, back to the earlier part of today, this is not a matter of placing blame. It's not a matter that you've done something wrong and that because of this, your whole business is broken. It's not that. It's that this is an awareness. Okay. So this is about bringing forward that we now know, okay, maybe my pricing is not entirely strategic. And I want to go back to the drawing board and really make sure that I'm doing this well. Okay. That I've really thought of the pieces that are essential to determine my price. And so let's get into the steps you need to take to actually break down and set your price, or for you to edit your current pricing to your existing business and the offers you have in front of you. So, one step that you start with always is getting an understanding of your cost. You must, and I mean you must, understand what the cost of your offer is. And everyone says to me, how do I do this? And I'll tell you some things to consider. You need to know the time investment. So, how many hours are you spending per client? How many hours are you spending on an average project? You need to know the fixed and the variable costs. So, you need to know the tools you're using, the platforms that you're using, the systems that you're using to support said clients. You want to ask yourself, how much profit do I want? Meaning, how much do I want left over after all the costs are considered and covered? Also, do you potentially have a personal income goal? Meaning that you need to reverse engineer your rates based on what you need to pay yourself to hit an annual or a monthly goal. So, the thing that I tell people is like this part, I know it can feel very overwhelming because you're thinking, okay, there's so much that I need to know, but how do I get those numbers? It is actually very easy. It's just about actually asking those critical questions, sitting down and mapping out the numbers. It's not difficult if you take it piece by piece. If you just say, well, I'm going to run all the costs of it. Again, that's why I broke this in categories, because you don't necessarily just want to say the total cost. It's about the cost of the delivery. You want to consider the profit. You want to consider the personal goals, and you want to consider all the variable and fixed costs. Okay. So as I said, I usually with clients, for example, will do like a spreadsheet with this. So I would recommend that you get a spreadsheet and you actually outline this before setting your pricing. I'm taking a second out of today's episode to tell you about something really exciting, and it is happening right now. If you are someone who is interested in getting scaling support with your business, if you know that you've been able to get some consistency, you've been able to get some sales happening in your business, but you also know that you have untapped potential. You know that you are the person who's been taking notes on the different frameworks on this podcast, that you're listening to each episode, tuning into the different strategies you need. That is an incredible thing to be doing, but it also is very different to consume information versus to integrate that information. And that is exactly what we do with these types of frameworks that we teach here. And we help you to integrate those in a custom way in your business. Right now, our ITI Accelerator Mastermind doors are open. We have a promotion that is happening for a limited time. And I want to make sure that you, as the person diving into all of the strategy, are not someone to miss this. If you are a business right now that is ready to scale, if you want to potentially 2, 3, 4, 5x your business in the next 6 to 12 months, this is your invitation to do so. ITI Accelerator is a 6-month mastermind specifically designed to help you to do that. It is a combination of all the things that I love about coaching. We've got the modules and the course materials to help you learn the principles of what you need to know to scale and my strategies. We also have the one-on-one coaching, which helps you to customize that and integrate it. We've got the group aspects, so you can build a network of women just like yourself. And we have things like a Slack channel that you can contact in between when things come up day to day as they do. If you are somebody who's ready to really step into that next level of growth that you know you have within you and that you know is possible for you in the next 6 months, let this be your reminder. Let this be your invitation to take a step toward that potential that you know you have. So without further ado, let's get back into today's episode. So we now know things to consider around cost. Here's the thing. This is going to present some things. I'm going to kind of warn you in advance. There's some times where you're going to find that when you run the cost of your offer, it's going to become presented to you. It's going to almost hit you in the face, to be honest, that one of two things, that your costs are very low, and therefore that's great because it means that you have the ability to do it very efficiently. But more often, what I see is that people will find they have a decent amount of labor. It could be a contractor, it could be another service provider. You have a decent amount of labor costs that are going into providing to a specific client. So we need to really understand where is the bulk of the cost of delivery coming from? And also, is it balanced? So I'll give you an example. I was working with a social media manager, and we did this for her offers. So she had an editor, she had a designer, she had a copywriter, she has all these people on her team. And so we broke down per package how much time goes into the copy for that package, how much time goes into the editing. And what we realized was that the editor that she had on staff was severely inflating the cost. And so what we recognized was that this person and the amount they wanted per video to edit a video was so significant that it was really completely tanking her ability to generate more profit. And that's because if she wanted to have all the profit in addition to what the cost was, she was going to have to charge a lot of money for her packages, so much so that it kind of would have priced her out of the market. And what I mean by that is she would be so outside of the realm of her competitors that for her brand, it didn't make sense for her prices to be that high. And we're going to talk about brand in a little bit. So put a pin in that in your mind, okay? So what we realized was that she needed to make sure that this editor, one of two things, could adjust their expense, or she had to find someone who was more cost effective because it really wasn't something that was feasible for the business. She couldn't keep her at her current cost. So we discovered only by running these numbers that the cost was way too high of this individual. The other thing I see when you run cost is that you also might find that your cost is the issue. And it's because you're involved. It's not the package, it's you as the person that's actually tanking the numbers. And here's what I mean by that. Remember, we talked at the beginning talking about your hourly rate and how much you want to, in your mind, maybe you're not showing this in marketing, you're not showing this on a website, but there's in your mind how much you want to make for yourself, right? Well, the thing is, let's just say your hourly rate is $100 an hour. And that for you as the CEO or the business owner is your goal. That's how much you want to make. Or maybe it's even higher. Maybe it's $500 an hour. Whatever the number, if we put that into the calculator, we'll find 9 times out of 10 that you're probably not making a lot of money in the business because you're the person doing the service and your hours are valued at a higher rate, which is why you're not making money. So people say, how do I fix it? I'm like, you yourself either got to pay yourself a heck of a lot less, which is not usually the answer. The ideal answer is you got to outsource. If your hourly value for you to provide, let's just say again, like do social media for a client, maybe you want to charge $100 an hour for yourself. That's great. I love that for you. Let's do that. But it means that if you have a team member, you might not be able to pay your whole team $100 an hour. So you have to say, okay, well, can I find someone who's $50 an hour to be able to help me with the editing? So this is where the cost is important. It shows us a variety of things. It can show us, certain staff that are, bloating the cost. It could be you being involved is bloating the cost. It could be the fact that, hey, we've realized the costs are actually very low and this is great news and you're very efficient and productive. It could show you that everyone's hourly rates are very fair, but they're taking a lot of time, meaning it's not that they're paid too much, it's that they're paid fairly, but they're spending a lot of time to do things. So we want to get more efficient with how we do it. So an example, another kind of analogy for you, Starbucks, and I'm Canadian, so Tim Hortons, Tim Hortons or Starbucks, they actually, at all their windows, they have a timer. And so they have like an on average, and I don't know the exact numbers, don't quote me on this, but generally speaking, they pay their staff around $20 or 20 something dollars an hour. And so they are not going to increase the cost of the staff that they have. Again, 9 times out of 10, they're going to keep it around the same number. But what they do to be able to get back money within the business and again, to create more profit is that they try to become more efficient in how many clients are served from the one person at the window. So how do they do that? They have a timer at the window. You can't usually see it at Starbucks because it's on the cashier side, but they have a timer of how fast they try to get you through the window. And so that is a goal to basically say how many clients, i.e., how many coffees can we get through this pipeline in a given shift of X amount of people working. And so that's really how they, again, look to increase how much money they're making while keeping their costs the same. So there's a lot of different ways that we'll see this in the world and also within our own businesses, but it starts with understanding the cost. We have to know the cost of your service. And it's not something, if you've ignored it until this point, I'll be very blunt with you, you may have been lucky, right? I had these moments too in my business. I was lucky that based off the prices that I asked and that I had requested, that I was okay, meaning I had still enough in there. It wasn't great, but I had enough in there to kind of get through. But it's only something you can ignore or back burner for so long. Eventually, we have to get an intentional strategy around why we're charging what we are based off the cost of what our service actually is. So, the other thing we want to consider is category positioning. We talked a little bit earlier about brand, and we talked about how important brand is within your pricing. And if you have heard me talk on other episodes, and even if you've ever heard me talk on stage, if you've heard me talk on other podcasts, I talk about this a lot because I think many people ask me, Kate, how do I charge higher ticket in anything, as an agency, as a coach, consultant, course creator, digital products, you name it. People ask me, how do I charge more? And the thing that I tell people is you have to consider the brand context, because as a brand, you have limitations on how expensive your products can be. And so I'm going to break down for you the 3 tiers of brand that you want to consider, which is the starting tier is what's considered to be mass market. This is the equivalent of like a Walmart, okay? So this is something that every single person, everyday people can go into and can go shop at. That's like the level 1. Level 2 is premium. Premium, I want you to think of is like a Stanley's, the Stanley water bottles. There's a normal water bottle that you can get at Walmart, but then there's a little bit of an elevated. It's not, the water bottle itself is not, like $120, but it is something that's considered premium for the water bottle market. The third level of the 3 is luxury. Luxury is when you are the top tier, your pricing is going to reflect it, your experience is going to reflect it, and typically the price of the product is not in correlation to anything other than the feeling of the brand. So I'm going to kind of break these down. Mass market is, as I said, Walmart. And that's because the person who's going into Walmart, we have a preconceived idea of how much something is going to cost. So when we go into Walmart, we're expecting average everyday pricing. Now, granted, inflation has kind of kicked our butt in the recent years, but generally speaking, all the pricing should be something that's very approachable, very reasonable. That's mass market because just as it sounds, it's meant for the mass market. It's meant for the masses to be able to afford and to buy. They're catering with their brand to the everyday person who can buy their products. Now, the second tier is what we consider to be premium. Now, premium is very different than luxury. Premium, I want you to think, is basically for anyone who's mass market who sees a little bit of an added value or added brand in buying something. But the distinction between premium and luxury is that the thing that you're holding is not a status symbol. That's the difference. Because premium in any category is what you're doing in the mass market, but slightly elevated. But you're still selling the product. You're not selling the brand. You're not selling the feeling. So premium is something like, as I said, with Stanley, the Stanley water bottles. I feel like everyone and their mom has a Stanley water bottle. It's my personal support water bottle. It goes everywhere with me. It's on the floor right now. I'm obsessed with her. This water bottle is like a $50 water bottle. And when you think about $50 for a water bottle, you're like, why? Like, what's so special about it, right? But it's considered to be made to keep your drink cold forever. It's considered to be something that fits in your cup holder. So it solves kind of a unique problem that many other water bottles are constantly an issue with. And it's also something that over time caught on and kind of took a brand vibe of its own and kind of caught wildfire. So everyone and their mom had a Stanley. Kids, older individuals, everybody wanted a Stanley. So the thing that we want to consider though is that it's not luxury because it's not so unattainable that the everyday person couldn't buy it. It's the reason that, for example, like someone that I know, their child literally has a Stanley that they take to school every day. If it was luxury, your child wouldn't be taking it to school, just the same way that your average child wouldn't be taking Dior or Chanel to school. Okay. That's luxury. So then we go into the luxury bucket. And so you ask yourself, okay, well, what is luxury? Luxury pricing is when the pricing of the thing that we're selling has nothing to do with the cost. We still want to know what the cost is, but how we determine the price is not really based off cost. It's based off brand and it's based off feeling. When we go into buying a Dior bag, we're not asking what it's made of. We're not asking how much it costs. We're not looking for discounts. We're buying it because when we hold a Chanel or when we hold a Dior bag or when you wear Louboutin shoes, there's a status symbol that's associated with that. And so when you're having pricing connected to it, the pricing has nothing to do with the product. It has nothing to do with the service. It has to do with the level of brand that you're buying into, the status of what it means to be part of that business, to be part of that brand. That's what you're selling. Brand around luxury is all about feeling and it's all about status. So your pricing is evaluated based on brand and it's evaluated based on status. Meaning, if I'm going to go buy a pair of Louboutin shoes, which on average can, start at around $1,000 for a pair of shoes. If I'm going to go buy a pair of Louboutin shoes, the question that comes up for me is, do I value the brand and to wear that enough, to have that status of those red bottoms enough that I want to go spend $1,000 on a pair of shoes? That's how we think about it. We don't ask what the shoes are made of. We don't ask how long they're going to last. We don't ask about any of that. We don't care. We just want the status. So the reason this is important for you is you have to know when you're setting your prices, what are you really selling, right? The price, again, is a determining factor of the problem you're solving. So are you solving the function of the product like a mass market? Are you solving the function plus a little bit of brand like a premium? It's a little bit more elevated of a product. Or are you selling luxury where all you're selling is feeling and status? And none of these are right or wrong, by the way. There's no better if you're mass market, better if you're luxury. There's no right or wrong answer. The key thing here is that you actually understand how you are sorted into one of these buckets. Where do you fall? And with that, understanding how you plan to price in accordance with that. It would be weird if you walked into Walmart and everything was $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. It would also be weird if you went into Chanel and everything was discounted in $9.99. The price has to reflect the category of the type of brand that you're in. It's a really important thing when you understand brand positioning, it greatly impacts your pricing. So there's also a brand conversation to be had here, okay? This is also, I want to take a quick second to acknowledge this is why pricing is not as simple as adding a price to your sales page. This is what I mean. We've got the financial calculations of running the cost. We now have talked about brand and understanding your brand positioning around price. These pieces matter to make sure that you actually have strategic pricing. Now, third is your competitor landscape. So, do you know who your competitors are? If you don't, start there. I want you to make a list of if someone is thinking about investing with you or investing with somebody else, who are the top 3 to 5 people that they're thinking about investing with or that they're comparing you, your offers, or your product to? That's something you need to know. And whether you consume those people at length or not, I don't care. It's more a matter of understanding that they exist and also what they bring to the table that you want to know what your ideal client is comparing to. So you want to know, what are they charging? What is included with what they're charging? And how, again, as a brand, are they positioned? And the reason I covered brand before this is you have to consider, are they in the same category as a brand as you? Dior, if they sold a purse, should never consider or compare themselves to a purse that's being sold at Walmart because they're not in the same brand category. So this is why understanding these pieces matter, because when you're looking at competitors, again, this is why it's a big, big, big mistake to just see what someone's charging and say, great, I'm going to charge that. If you don't fall into a similar category of brand, you're really undervaluing yourself. You're really somebody who is going to be pricing off of information that's not accurate for you. So you want to know how they're positioned. And with that, you want to know, are you going to be the person who's considered more premium in comparison to them? Are you considered to be more affordable, more for the everyday person in comparison to them? Are you potentially more proven? Do you maybe have more results? Do you maybe have more proof of process than they do? Are you somebody who maybe is more specialized? Do you have more specific insights and awarenesses than that person does? And it's important for us to know, how do we differentiate from our competitors? How are we different in the way that we do things? And asking ourselves those questions when we're setting the price. And you also want to think about, if you're comparing your price to your competitor, do you know how they came up with their pricing? Because you want to also recognize that if you are someone, let's just say right now, who's like, oh, Kate, and even just listening at this moment, I recognize that I probably could increase my prices. Well, what if someone's comparing their pricing to yours? What if someone sees yours and you know you're undercharging, and now they're comparing their price to your pricing that you and I know are undercharging? So, this is why all of this is a curiosity and all of it is an investigation. I want you to think about, setting your price is not always an equation. It's actually an auditing of these questions and of these categories to then say, with all this information that I've gathered, with kind of investigating all these areas of, for example, brand or competitors or cost, now that I have all this, I get this in front of me and I say, okay, great. What based off this feels like a good price point? And how do we explain why we've chosen that price? Competitors are important because you have to know that your pricing is not like in a vacuum. It's not just you. When you have an ideal client that comes to you, they will cross reference your pricing with your competitors. And so if you're higher, that's fine, but you have to have brand and marketing that makes sense why you're higher. It also, on the flip side, if you're seeing that your competitors are higher and you want to go lower, you want to make sure that your brand and your marketing correlates to that goal. So this is why all this is super important, okay? Now, number 4, one of the things that I really do take in consideration with pricing is credibility factors, which is your price should actually showcase or match your perceived expertise as a facilitator, as, a service provider in anything you do. Your price should match your perceived expertise. Now, you'll notice the word perceived in there, because perceived means in the eye of the consumer, what they perceive to be your level of expertise or authority, not necessarily always what it actually is. So, what do we look at when we think about credibility? We look at, do you have proof of your process? Do you have testimonials? Do you have case studies? Do you have wins from clients? Do you have reviews of the experience? Do you have proof of process and proof of the concept of your business? Reputation. Are you known to be trusted? Are you someone who has credibility and leverage within your space? Or are you brand spanking new and you just got here yesterday, and because of that, you're new to the market? Again, things to consider. Doesn't mean you automatically have to discount because you're new to the space. It's just things to be aware of. We also want to know, do you have a unique lens? Do you have a unique methodology or a unique framework that you bring as insight or expertise to the table? And again, as I said, when I first started my business, I didn't have a framework because I was just starting and I had no proof of process with clients. But over time, in working with people, my signature process, which by the way, we have episodes on, so I really recommend you go listen to that if you don't have one, that started to present itself. It started to show me, okay, great. I have, something here that is showing me there's a lens of development around what I'm doing with clients and how I'm doing it. And that became our IP, our intellectual property. It became the frameworks of how we do what we do and why we do them that way. So I really recommend asking yourself, do I have intellectual property here? Do I have a unique framework? And also, visibility. Do you have more demand? Do you have the ability to increase your price because you have a flexible amount of people that are looking to work with you? There's an aspect of credibility that is important. And, I want you to think about an analogy maybe outside of you and me. So let's think about, I'm going to let you get coached by Tony Robbins. Okay? Let's just say the price is $300,000 and Tony Robbins' team says that they will coach you for $300,000. And he's been around for decades. And then you have a new coach who pops up on the internet and they say, guess what? I'm also $300,000. Who do you think is valued at $300,000 and why? There's a couple of things to consider, right? Brand is piece of it. We have more of an acknowledgement of Tony Robbins. But what we really have is we have credibility. We have the understanding of his perceived expertise. And we also have an understanding of what credibility he has. He has so many events and so much social proof and testimonials and impact that has been created as a result of him and his brand. So to assume that someone new on the internet is going to charge $300,000 when someone else like a Tony Robbins is charging $300,000 for a similar delivery, there's a disconnect. And what will naturally happen with your consumer is they'll say, okay, well, if again they're price shopping and they see someone more credible than you or more experienced than you has higher pricing, the question becomes, okay, well, where does your price come from? Meaning, how can I understand how we got to this price? So, how can the new coach explain why they're the same price as Tony Robbins? So this is why, and again, it's not to say that they can't charge that, but you better be able to explain or to position or to market why that is. But often, if you have, again, to our example, a Tony Robbins priced at 300,000, maybe you start at a 150 because you're not quite at that level yet. You want to anchor into understanding what are the other pieces of pricing that are happening on the market. The other thing that is number 5 is actually understanding the client desire and the outcome value. The thing I tell people is, again, the level of the price you have is a direct byproduct of the level of the problem you solve. And the easy example I give to all clients around this is valet parking. When you are in the midst of a crazy city, if you are in Washington, if you're in Chicago, if you're in New York, if you're in Toronto, if you're in any major city, you know the feeling of just wanting to get where you're going, especially if you're late. And you know where you want to go, but you just have nowhere to park. You're like, why can I not find a parking spot to save my life? And then you see this beautiful valet sign and you think, okay, well, the valet parking, let's just say in Toronto, could be $50, right? Or $60, but the normal parking is 20. Well, in a moment where I need to get to where I'm going and I need to get there quickly, it would not pass me to say, okay, great. Should we just valet? That question comes up for people when they're looking to park in those situations. Why is that? It is because of the outcome value. By paying that extra money, you are going to have the ability to achieve the outcome you want faster, easier, or better. So, understanding what is the actual pain that you're solving. Valet charges more than the traditional parking lot because they understand that the problem that they're solving is not just parking your car, because you could park your car. They're parking your car when it's difficult to find parking. And oftentimes it's closer, meaning it's right in front of the door. You get dropped off. You're getting dropped off in front of the door to park the car because you're able to then just walk right inside. So there's a convenience factor. The value is you literally get dropped off and walk in. You don't have to worry about getting across the street and finding the entrance and then getting back to your car and all of that. And the best part is they'll bring it right back to you when you're done. So there's an aspect of problem solved here that warrants the price being more. And the other thing that's also relevant with the valet parking is there's also typically an aspect of urgency and readiness. So what we see with, again, more elevated pricing is there an aspect of urgency, meaning are clients willing to pay more to get results faster or to get an outcome faster? And with valet parking, that's exactly the case. We are paying to be able to get to our location faster. We're paying to save time. We're paying for convenience. So, even for example, an Uber Eats order, that's another example. When we pay $4.99 for something to be delivered to our house, we're paying a premium because we don't want to go to the restaurant. We don't want to go to the grocery store. We want it delivered to our house. We're paying a premium for convenience. So it's not about, well, I could go to the grocery store. Well, then, yeah, you could go to the grocery store. Go do that. But what's the perceived value? Perceived value is I don't have to leave my house. I can stay in my pajamas. Maybe let's just say you're working. You could work and have lunch delivered. So you're not having to take time out of your workday to go get lunch. And yes, you're paying a little bit of a premium to have it delivered, but that to you offsets and makes sense compared to what you'd have to give up to go get it yourself and to wait for the order to be made and then to drive home. So you'll see here that the outcome or the value of the problem solved can also be something that makes, to be honest, most people either minimize the price in their head or not see it entirely. When we are having a day and we do not want to leave the house, Uber Eats is like our saving grace because we would love to have food delivered. We don't want to have to get off the couch. Or if you felt really, really sick and you're like, I can't get to the store, there's an immense value that comes with having it delivered to your home. We want to recognize that your service, your business has the same ability to tap into that. You as well can tap into the opportunity to say, what's the value here? What's the urgency? What's the readiness? Now, number 6 is energy. And this is, emotional alignment, if I could label it that. And it's because you want to ask yourself, am I feeling excited or drained to deliver what I'm delivering to clients at this price? And if your answer is drained, like if you think about the clients that you're serving and you say, am I excited to deliver to them for this kind of money? Am I excited to support them in this way for this investment? If you feel like you are drained, that's a very clear indicator that your pricing is too low. And that means you probably are really over delivering for how much you're actually asking or charging. And it's a gut check that I do as my last step, which is why it's the last step that I mentioned. It's the last step in really determining, does this feel right for me? And it's the most non strategic, but it is something that your price should be energizing. It shouldn't be something that makes you think, okay, like here starts the suffering for this amount of money, right? Like it should be something you feel good, you feel excited to show up every day. Because I will be honest, if you don't do this, you will start to resent your business. You will start to resent your clients. You can sometimes resent your team because your team is the cost that you're paying out for serving those clients, right? This dominoes into so many areas. It's really important for you to have a price that you feel good and you feel excited about. So if you are someone who feels like right now, thinking about doing what you do for your clients for how much you're being paid, you're like, oh, I'm not getting paid enough to do this. Please let that be your sign that unless you change your pricing or change the way that you're delivering to clients, meaning to reduce cost, something here has to change because over time, it's just going to build and build and build and build more and more resentment in your business and frankly, within your life. So the energy piece is important. And someone actually asked me, I went to a speaking engagement recently, and someone asked me, they said, how do you get your head around pricing? Like, how do you get your head around charging that number? And I shared with her that there was an opportunity. I had a coaching call with my business coach at the time. I said to him, I really, same thing. I had this feeling. I said, I really feel like I need to charge more. I am busting my butt to provide in this. And I feel like I'm putting in a lot of hours, but I definitely, for how long it's taking me, I'm not being fairly compensated. So he's like, great. Well, what's your number? I remember the time I said, something around like $30,000. And he's like, great. On your next call, pitch that. And I was like, pitch 30,000. He was like, pitch 30,000. I was like, yeah, but like I should change this. I should change that. He's like, no, we've gone through all the stages. The cost, we know. The profit margin that you need to have, we know. But it was this increase that I was like, I energetically am having to do so much for this client in emotional support, in extra TLC, in accountability, and all of these things that I was like, I just feel like at the end of the day, it doesn't feel fair enough compensation for all the cost that's baked in, but then also all the extra things that are there emotionally. And so he's like, name your number. And so I did. And so he's like, what I want you to do is I want you to get on your next sales call and I want you to pitch that number. And I remember I was like, what? I don't have a contract. I don't have a payment link. I don't have any of this. And I remember him saying like, it's going to be 3, 2, 1, go. And you're going to get on your next call and you're going to pitch that number. Well, let me tell you that I pitched that number on that next sales call and that person paid in full. So I was like, holy shit, because it was the sign to me that my pricing and that like no one's going to pay that and I can't charge that. Like I had all these reasons why I couldn't increase my price. And what I recognized was it was my energy around the price. It had nothing to do with calculations. I had done all these steps. The last piece was the energetic aspect, which was like, what is a number that I will feel good about asking and be like, I am jumping out of bed excited to go serve you tomorrow. And that's what the price was. So I said, okay, great, 3, 2, 1, go. And so I did. And I asked and I charged that price. And so I just want to, finish today with giving you some insight around our pricing and what I've learned. And it really does correlate to the steps we talked about today. As I gained more knowledge, as I said, that's really what allowed me to feel more confident logistically in charging more. I also will say something that helped a lot was getting more results. One thing I really emphasized in my entire business was getting proof. I ask every single client for a testimonial. I ask every single client for a review of their experience because I want to be able to have people understand it's not just me saying that I think I'm great or me saying that I think our programs are great, but instead it's actually looking back to say, okay, great. Well, how can I ensure that other people also are communicating the same thing and share with new people who want to work with me that same feeling? So it's why, on our website, and you can go check it out to kind of see how I laid it out. But we really emphasize having the testimonial in the social proof area, which is literally an entire scrollable page of all different reviews and testimonials of people who've gone through our programs and gone through our coaching. And that for us is very important because if we didn't have that, I would be the only person who's saying it's great. So results were a big thing over the years that I really emphasize, which has made charging high ticket very, very easy now because I have proof of concept from other people. I also will say our brand, we've done a lot of work on making sure that people are able to understand what category we're in. So we're definitely considered a premium brand. Not luxury, I wouldn't say, because I don't really sell status, but I sell more than just strategy in the sense of like we really care about our media, we care about our marketing, we care about the feeling that people get inside of our world. And so it's not luxury because like I'm just like, I'm not selling like you can sit with me because I don't really believe in that. But for me, I am selling the fact that we're doing things in an elevated way than most of the coaches you're going to hire on the market. And so we fall into the premium bucket. So by reinforcing the premium, having a premium website that was a brand deliverable that showed that, our premium content and having really good quality video and media that translated that premium brand, that also, to be honest, made it really easy. I was closing $50,000 packages left, right, and center with basically no objections. And that's because I had the brand to kind of anchor people into what they thought my pricing was going to be. I had people who came to me who said, honestly, I thought working with you was a lot more. So, like, for example, inside of our accelerator mastermind, the starting rate to work with us a month is $19.75. So people were like, "Oh my God." Like I thought it was easily going to be like $3,500 a month. And I was like, "No." And so what we do is we have the premium pricing that if anything, because of the way we've done it has actually made people think that our pricing is more expensive than it is. So that's actually a new problem that we found in our business is that our brand and our marketing became so elevated. It became so premium that what we realized was people thought we were more expensive than we were. And so we had two invitations with that. We could say, okay, great. Well, do we need to increase our prices then? Because people think we're more expensive. Should we increase them? But we're like, we shouldn't do that because we're not a luxury brand, meaning we're not selling status. We are still in an aspect selling brand in connection to the product. So now we're really all about fair pricing. It's not accessible necessarily, meaning the fact that it's like for the everyday person, it's not mass market, but it is still like the Stanley, something that if you are like, I don't just want a water bottle, I want like the Stanley water bottle. It's a little bit more expensive, but it is something that I feel like is worth the investment. We are basically trying to be the Stanley of business coaching. And so that's kind of our perception around what we're focusing on right now. The other thing I would also say is practice. If you are someone who's now decided maybe after today that you want to change your pricing or you want to elevate your pricing, but you also have this kind of little voice in your mind being like, will people close? Will people buy? Like, will they close at that price? Will people spend that on me? That is something that I want to invite you to unpack because I was not always someone who closed big packages. Like again, my first offer for 12 weeks was $9.97. So this is something that over time I have needed practice with, I have needed reps in. And if you are someone who's doing this for the first time, you're not going to necessarily always out the gate for the next 7 calls you pitch the price on. They may not all close, but just like that situation where my coach prompted me to take the leap, I did. And that person closed into a client that I just became like I just adored and loved working with. And so these are invitations. This is an invitation for you to step into your worth. It's an invitation for you to dive into those numbers that kind of make you a little bit anxious, but you know that you need to run those. That's something I want you to use as an invitation today to dive into. Dive into what kind of brand are you? Which category do you fit into? And asking yourself those questions so that you have a basis from what your pricing is and why you're charging that pricing. And most importantly, if you are somebody who after today feels like you have like, okay, like I am claiming my new price, I'd love to hear it. I would love to hear it. If you're like, Kate, my pricing used to be 2,000, I've decided it's 4, beautiful. I would love to hear from you. If you also feel like maybe even today validated that your current pricing was actually strategic all along, amazing. Like that's even better, right? Like whatever you feel is the takeaway today, the number one thing that I always say that I learned from an incredible mentor of mine is that there's transformation, but the most important transformation that you can ever have is the one that you're witnessed in because it allows you to have this aspect of accountability to change. And so I want to invite this for you to reach out, just share a win as a highlight of today's episode. You guys know that I always, by the way, love hearing from you. It like fills my bucket in a way that I cannot describe when you reach out. And so if you want to slide into my DMs on Instagram at Kate Perkovic, I'd love to hear from you. Any takeaways, downloads that you had from today. And I also have a quick ask, by the way. I know I very rarely do this, but it would just mean the absolute world to me. If you are someone who listens to this episode and even the ambitious show every single week, and you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, it would mean the absolute world to me if you would just take a couple seconds before you move on with your day to subscribe or to follow our show on Spotify. In doing so, like what it really does help myself and our team to do is to get our show, as a result of that, it gets it more seen on these platforms. And it helps us to be able to get this message and these conversations to even more women just like yourself who need this to be able to scale their business to the next level. So it would mean the absolute world to me if you would take a moment to do that. And I also want to just say a massive thank you. If you are someone who's consuming every week and you're like an OG listener and you guys know who you are, I just had the ambitious networking dinner in Toronto just recently, and I got to meet some incredible listeners of the podcast. And it was just such a full circle moment. It like filled my heart in a way I can't describe. It means the world to me that you tune in every week. And so I want to say thank you and also congratulate you for taking this time to focus on you and your mindset and your business every single week. And also, if you are someone who's brand spanking new to the podcast, welcome to the Ambitious family. We are beyond excited and happy to have you here. We also have a little family community, which is called the Ambitious Network. It is a free community where you can get resources, giveaways, all kinds of stuff connected to the podcast, downloads, templates, all kinds of great stuff. So if you're also not in there, message me the word network on Instagram and I can always send you a link to join us in there. But all of that to be said, I hope today was helpful for you and that you took some pricing notes. I can't wait to see you out here just like commanding your price, charging that high ticket, running your cost, all of it. Like I'm just beyond excited for how you take this and integrate. And so with all that being said, thank you for spending today with me and I will see you on the next episode. As always, stay ambitious.